Start by talking about the numbers. And again, this is something that everyone's all paranoid about these days. Oh, the numbers are going up. Oh, it's doomsday, right? But you really need to take these with a grain of salt. And and really, really need to take them with a grain of salt. And why is that? It's because um, they're just the numbers. The deaths and the people in the ICU, even the people in the hospital, that number isn't a lot higher than it was back in March and April, especially when you take it for a percentage of the actual positives, right? Like for example, back in March and April, we were testing like 2,000 people a day in Alberta. Now we're testing, some days in the tens of thousands, right? I think Ontario's upwards of 40,000. So you need to take these with a grain of salt in that number one, the number we should be looking at is the percent positive rate. And number two, we need to come up with an actual better system for figuring out how many of these are false positives. And Mark Prolovis here says, how did we get rid of the you know what if the gold standard of testing is totally flawed? PCR tests are not diagnostic. They yield false positives when they cycled above 25. Ontario cycles 35 to 45. We are testing now more than at the height of the pandemic. That's why so many positive. Now, again, for people that don't, now again, there's a lot more that goes into it than what I understand, but most people have no idea, like literally no idea what they're talking about. In that the tests don't simply test, false or false or positive, right? They don't know that. All they do is they amplify existing. I don't even know what the proper word for it would be, but they amplify it. And the recommendation is once you go above 25 times, you start to get false positives because everybody has trace amounts of this kind of stuff in their system, right? Even if you don't actually have the virus, you're going to have trace amounts, or at least trace amounts of something that would yield a positive if amplified to a certain degree. And that is the problem, that most of these areas are above that 25 number, which means a lot of the people that are testing positive, specifically the younger population, and that I've heard a lot of these doctors say that too. So this isn't just me making stuff up. In that, when you test a population that is already um, a lot higher than the average to be asymptomatic, in other words, the young people, you're going to get even more false positives. So this is the problem that I've seen. I've seen numbers that point towards upwards of half the cases are false positives, especially in the younger people, right? The older people, probably not, but especially the younger people. So this is the big problem that I guess the point to get across here is that the amount of cases we're seeing on a day-to-day basis is pretty much irrelevant. It's pretty much irrelevant. Now, why is that? Because if you have a case and you're asymptomatic, it doesn't matter, right? Like you're very unlikely to spread it. Again, this is another massive lie that we've been told about this. And Fauci even said that he said like something along. I don't know what the exact quote is. I know I brought it up before, but you know, um, viruses are never spread through asymptomatic spread or something along those lines, or at the very least the driving cause of the spread is not through asymptomatic cases. He said something along those lines. You can look that up if you want. But this is the thing. Virus they're not spread through. This is the big lie that the people that are all paranoid about this say is that, oh well, if we let the people that aren't at risk go back to normal, then they're all going to spread it to their grandparents and we're all going to die, right? But no, that's not how it works. That's not how it works, right? So again, that's the first thing I wanted to bring up. The next thing is from Kian Bexty here, and he says Rachel Notley just said that she wants to shut down late night bars because apparently the virus is extra dangerous when it's dark outside. In reality, she hates that Albertans are continuing to live their lives and doesn't get to cash in on authoritarianism. Read the room. Now, again, this is just such a stupid idea that many areas have been doing. Why are we having curfews? Like, how does this make any sense? Like, if we're going to have the bars be open and these restaurants be open, how does it make any sense to close them early? How does that? I'd love to see the science behind that. And considering the fact that they've never actually provided it, I mean, Ontario shut down gyms, or at the very least gyms in some of these more populous areas, and they gave one example of people of some spread that happened in one gym. Of the probably thousands of gyms in these areas, one of them had, some cases. Ooh, the horror, right? It's just pure insanity. Like, it's such insanity, it's not even funny. And the big problem is the mainstream media and these politicians that are whipping people up into a frenzy over this. And this is the craziest thing. Like, if the mainstream media changed the tone, like if they changed their tone and said, "Yeah, it's just the flu. We got nothing to worry about." By Christmas time, everybody would be mocking people that are worried about this again, right? Like back in like January, February, if you were like, stocking up on food or like getting like, PPE and stuff like that, you were mocked, right? You were mocked. But now it's the exact opposite, right? When in reality, it's somewhere in the middle. And it's closer to the it's just a flu, but it is a little bit worse than the flu, but not the death rate, just the fact that it spreads more. So that's the big problem, that how does this stuff make any sense? Like, this is the thing. Like, if they can actually provide us with some evidence, maybe, like, at the very least, it's up for debate. But they don't provide us with any evidence of any of this stuff, any of it. And because the average person is ignorant enough to just blindly believe the news and what these politicians tell them, they'll go along with it. They don't care that the news and the politicians were telling them to do the exact opposite. They told us, "Oh, don't wear masks." You know, having travel restrictions is xenophobic, don't you know? But now, if you want to, you know, it's these people that all were all over that are the ones that don't want to open the border, right? So again, it's just such insanity. It's not even funny. And this is the problem. That the big problem is these people's beliefs, and by these people I mean the people that are all over the lockdowns and the mask wearing and all that garbage. Their worldviews, it has nothing to do with objective reality, objective truth. It has nothing to do with any of that kind of stuff. It's entirely emotionally driven and power driven. All they care about is satisfying the emotions of their paranoid base, and to power, right? Like that's all it's about, is how can we get more power? That's what it's about. Again, like I say, it has nothing to do with objective truth, objective reality, which is why I think when you try and have a debate with these people about objective truth and objective reality, it goes nowhere, because they don't care about that, right? They don't care about it. Like, if you told them that, you know, we could get, like, let's just say hypothetically, the cases would go down guaranteed if we reopened. Do you honestly believe that? And like I say, obviously it's a hypothetical situation. You don't know anything for sure, but hypothetical situation, these people they still wouldn't change their minds, right? They still wouldn't change their minds. It doesn't matter how much evidence there is stacked up against these people; they won't change their minds. So anyway, that's another thing I wanted to bring up. The next thing to bring up is from the Post Millennial, saying breaking Trudeau announces investment in fight against online hate speech. Now, what do they mean by this? I mean, you can take it one of two ways. You can take it from the crazy far left social justice warrior narrative, which is the narrative that Trudeau buys into and supports, in that, oh, they're just cracking down against more racism and more sexism and all this largely make believe issues that they talk about. Or two, you can take it in that they just want to silence free speech, specifically for people who disagree with them politically, and that is clearly what it is. Like that, it couldn't be more obvious. That's what it is, because there is no such thing as hate speech, right? Like, if you believe in the concept of hate speech, then you don't believe in the concept of free speech by definition. Because the idea behind hate speech, and why it's a bad thing, at least from the crazy people's perspective, is that by saying things that they find offensive, they find it one and of the same as physically assaulting them or physically hurting them. Right? That's why they are so vehemently against it, because they view it as one and of the same. But that's not how the law works, and that's not how the law was intended to work either. In that there is a very fine difference between physically hurting someone and saying stuff that offends them. But again, from the crazy people's perspective, they don't think there is, which is why they want to police hate speech, right? And this is the thing, like I've mentioned a million times, obviously we're going to have to keep mentioning it because there's a lot of people that don't know this. probably not people that are watching this, but like I always say, you probably know people that believe this garbage. So anyway, um, unless you believe that the most abhorrent, the people with the craziest beliefs you can possibly think of get free speech, you don't believe in free speech, because the whole point of free speech, it has nothing to do with popular speech. It has nothing to do with it. If it had everything to do with speech that the majority of people agreed with, then you wouldn't need it, right? It has everything to do with the people that have the craziest beliefs still get the right to speak. Now, again, can they call for violence? No. Can they defame people? No. That is a difference, right? And that's already in the law too. So there's nothing that needs to be changed. Um, but again, this is the thing that you can't stand too, is that they bring up these over the top, like massive hyperbolic examples of why they think they're wrong. And again, like the classic, oh, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater, right? Well, can you provide one example throughout history of that happening? And again, that's still not an exception, right? If you yell fire in a crowded theater and someone injures themselves, you are liable for that. And obviously, if there's no fire, you would be liable for that, right? So again, that's such a terrible argument. It's not even funny. And again, when people make these arguments, the first thing that I think is that these people live in a massive echo chamber, like a massive echo chamber. And that the easiest way to tell if someone lives in an echo chamber is if they're completely unfamiliar with the arguments of the belief systems that they don't agree with. If you're completely unfamiliar with the arguments of people who disagree with you, you live in an echo chamber by definition, right? So again, that's another thing I wanted to bring up. The last thing is BC election. Again, I don't really care about BC. I don't live there, and I mean they're going off the deep end anyway. But again, it is still an election, so it should be talked about. NDP majority. So you had 55 seats for the NDP, 29 for the Liberals, and 3 for the Greens. The first thing that I noticed this when I seen this is that I didn't realize BC was this far left. Now I knew they were far left in the cities, right, in the Vancouvers and the Kelownas of the world, and Victorias. But I didn't think they were this lefty in the rural areas, which very much surprised me. Um, I know they do vote. There is some conservative seats in the federal election, which is something that I really find odd. That you can have a place like Alberta, where, like in Calgary and Edmonton, a lot of the seats go NDP or Liberal, but yet provincially they're almost all conservative, right? It's kind of odd, and that it's not even as if you can make the argument that provincially the conservatives are more moderate, and I don't think they are more moderate. I think they're still pretty moderate, but the federal conservatives are about as moderate comes. Um, so anyway, like I say, I mean, I don't think it's good news. I think BC is going to continue to go down a worse and worse path. Their entire economy is propped up by a pretty much non-existent tourism industry and by Chinese money that's not going to last forever. So again, I don't think, I mean, they're not in as bad a shape as like Ontario or some places like that their economy is in massive amounts of debt. But they're not exactly in good shape either. I mean, like I say, they get lucky and that their economy is propped up by so much Chinese money and tourism, right? Like it's very funny that you have all these crazy lefties in Alberta that bring up, although we got to diversify and by diversify they should be really honest. By diversify they mean going completely away from oil and gas. It's not like, yeah, let's have maybe 10, 20, 25% renewables. No, it's 99% renewables, right? Like let's go completely against it, which isn't the definition of diversifying by definition, sorry, but they like that makes them look a lot more credible, so that's why they say it like that. So but when it comes to BC, like why does no one bring up them diversifying, right? Like if it wasn't for Chinese money um, and their tourism, which is a unstable industry, they're going to be in for a world. Why does no one bring that up with Quebec as well? They balance their budget based off the at least $10 billion they get from equalization every year. Funny they don't have to diversify, right? It's almost as if we don't really want people to diversify. It's if you go off the deep end to the left, well, we could care less how little diversification you have, but if you're to the right of center in any way, shape, or form, then you got to diversify, right? Like I say, the the dishonesty and the manipulation of these people is what really bothers me. Like, and this is the thing, like I always bring up too, is that if people always bring up, oh, it's just a political disagreement, you shouldn't make such a big deal about it. Well, no, number one, it isn't just a political disagreement. We've passed those points. And number two, they're lying. There's a difference between a basic minor political disagreement and people flat out lying to you, right? Like there's a big difference between those two things. And that if they were actually honest and said, yeah, we don't actually want to diversify, we want to go completely away from oil and gas, at least they're honest, right? Like at least they're honest, and right. And the other way, like I say, they're dishonest in that they could care less about any other province diversifying. So anyway, that's the last thing I wanted to bring up. So if you like the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, especially, also BitChute and Parler. If you like to support my work, I always also got some links in the description for that. So like I say, make sure you hit that like and subscribe. Make sure you check out those other links in the description as well.